Next in our program, we'll be featuring our first panel on the future of smart transportation and mobility, a great segue. In this panel, we'll take a look at multimodal transportation, get an inside perspective from an auto parts maker, discover trends in upcoming connected vehicles, the future of public transportation, and discuss revolutionary ideas for the future of smart mobility. And our moderator is Sam Saad of the Innovation Factory. Sam is the Director of Strategic Initiatives with a focus on connected and autonomous vehicles and other advanced technologies at Hamilton's Innovation Factory. Sam spent 3 years as a United Nations electoral officer building capacity in democratic institutions in East Timor, Nepal, and Afghanistan. Sam became a program manager at the Ontario Centers of Excellence, managing an automotive-focused innovation portfolio totaling over $200 million. In 2012, he launched his first company, Just Access, a crowdfunding platform for the justice system. I'll call on Sam Saad to take the stage and introduce this panel.
Okay, great. So it's wonderful to be here with all of you in this absolutely beautiful building this morning. My name is Sam Saad, and I'll be introducing our panelists one by one. After they get up here, I'll be asking them a little bit about a project that they're currently working on, and then we'll have a very informal conversation about the topic. So another just key piece here, Afraj was not able to join us this morning, so we'll have three wonderful panelists. I'll start with Sue Zielinski. Please come on up, Sue. Sue is a consultant at Global Sustainable Transportation. She's a change agent for cities and mobility. She has been involved with initiatives around innovating and advancing smart, sustainable mobility systems, including the industry and enterprise that supply them for over 25 years. I also really enjoy asking my panelists something interesting about them, something a little bit fun. And when I asked Sue, what she told me is that she has been a tango dancer since the year 2000, and that she does consider tango dancing a form of transportation. So please put your hands together and join me in welcoming Sue. Our next speaker, please come on up, Dr. Syed Habibi. Syed is a senior NSERC Industrial Research Chair and a professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering at McMaster University. Specifically in the application areas for his research have included automotive, aerospace, and robotics. Interesting fact about Syed, he was an avid water skier for many, many, many years. He took a little bit of a break and thought that water skiing would be much like riding a bike. So when he went to teach his son just a few years ago how to water ski, he ended up not getting up, I think, even once, while his son is now the avid water skier. Please join me in welcoming Syed. And we also have Colin Dillon. Colin is the Chief Technical Officer at Canada's Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association. He is leading all connected and autonomous vehicle. I'll be referring to CAV throughout most of the presentation for connected and autonomous vehicle. He's leading all of the CAV technology projects and providing support to the Canadian automotive industry on matters of vehicle of the future and Industry 4.0. Colin is a self-described quote-unquote nut for the Liverpool Football Club. And if you ask him nicely, he might even show you the massive tattoo that he has on his right arm. Okay, so thank you all for coming up. Please join me and please put your hands together as I welcome Colin. So I'll ask each one of these lovely people about a project that they're currently working on before opening it up to a more informal dialogue. We'll kick off with Sue.
Is this on? You can hear me all right? Oh, great, up there. So I guess this isn't even a current project, it's my lifelong project, which is now called Mobility as a Service. And in the past, it's been called all sorts of different things, like New Mobility Hub Network, like Integrated Mobility Network, multi-modal, IT-enabled, door-to-door, sustainable, equitable transportation for moving people, moving goods, and moving less. So it's a whole bunch of stuff, but the main thing about what I've been doing all this time, I think, is to, first of all, concentrate on the humans. And second of all, with digital enabling. And second of all, doing the step change, which I think is the real step change right now, moving from mode, service, or technology into system. So system of systems. How do all of these things fit together so that someone can customize their own trip, so that companies can customize the way things get around, so that we don't even have to move sometimes. So the whole point of it is access rather than mobility. And I would say mobility rather than cars only. So I'll leave it at that.
Great. Thank you so much, Sue. Syed?
Thank you. I'm running a center called Center for Mechatronics and Hybrid Technologies at McMaster University. And it's just note that we have a very large research group there as part of McMaster Automotive Resource Center that looks at aspects of electrification, autonomous vehicles, as well as material that is used. It's one of the largest groups researching in the area of advanced technology vehicles. Our center looks at prognostics, condition monitoring, and diagnostics specifically for electrified and autonomous cars. And we look at sensors that could be used for traffic monitoring, for example, and test equipment for electric cars. One of the projects that I'm very proud of is the work that we did with an SME called DMV Electronics that is here in Toronto. And we worked with them to produce probably what is the most advanced battery cell tester for automotive. And now they're selling this as a product internationally. And we've also worked with OEMs looking at battery models, created one for i3 and i8, and also software products that, again, our industry partners sell internationally. Our center has really state-of-the-art equipment that are very expensive to reproduce. And that enables us to really support startup SMEs as well as work with OEMs. And we've been supporting 2 startups at McMaster. So these are very exciting times for the
Thank you, Syed, and thank you for enabling some of the technologies that we saw in the Toyota video. Colin, what are you up to these days?
First of all, thank you for having us on the panel, and to the Digifest team as well for putting this together. At the APMA, which is the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association, we've been around for about 68 years, being the voice of the auto sector here in Canada. But as Ron had kind of touched upon earlier in his presentation, there's been a changing kind of base and nature of the auto sector. There's definitely a move towards technology, the digital form. And so the APMA have been working with the Connected Vehicle Project for a few years, and now we're a part of the OCE's AVEN project, where we're leading the demonstration zone. So in the city of Stratford, we will be demonstrating SME-built, Ontario-built, connected and autonomous technology to showcase it to global tier ones and global OEMs. So, happy to provide that supporting role.
Thank you. So to play back what I just heard on that last piece, you can now go to Stratford, Ontario, and not only catch a play for the day, but also check out some of the latest state-of-the-art technologies, both in vehicle and in infrastructure. So I think defining some terms, the topic for the panel is future of smart transportation and mobility. So I'll kick off with you, Colin, and kind of work the way back here. How do you define smart transportation? Particularly, what are some of the technologies or policies required for smart transportation?
So, and again, I'm glad, one of my colleagues here on the panel talked about mobility as a service, because we are basically heading down that route now. So transportation, smart transportation has to be inclusive of, from a geographical standpoint, everything from the downtown core out to suburbia. And, how do we do it? We're all talking about, and it's really exciting to hear about autonomous vehicles. Elon came out on Monday on their Autonomy Day and talked about robo-taxis next year in 2020. His new chip, the new computer inside the Teslas, are now giving what he feels is a level 4. Some of us may argue maybe it's a level 3.5 autonomous. But, we are all heading towards this kind of like smarter way of transporting people, goods, and services. But how do you do it? So I'm a firm believer that it should happen from the core. When we talk about autonomous vehicles, you're not going to see them in my town, Caledon, Ontario, as quick as you're going to probably see him downtown Toronto. So, again, Elon Musk he was shooting down LiDAR technology and he shot down geofencing. But I will say that these kind of islands of autonomy, these downtown cores of the major cities will probably be the location for the introduction of, smart mobility. But it also requires, as Sam and I have spoken on many times, it also requires smart infrastructure as well. So the whole push for V2X is going to be a big thing. But I'll go one further. I'll say the concentric circles from the downtown cores have to be important in transportation. But we should also, from my design days, look at things in the Z-axis as well. And I will say subway systems in Toronto need to be, let's get the equipment in and let's start getting that moving, because, if you read the article from about 2015 in Spain, in Spain, and the mayor of Madrid, and the backlash he was getting for wanting to put more subway tunnels in and the cost associated. 5 years later, they've laid over 123 miles of subway line. He's now seen as a genius, equipment and machinery all paid for. I've been here in Canada for 26 years. It's pretty embarrassing that Toronto hasn't changed. Back. Two, let's look at the back trains and the hyper loop kind of technology. So let's not just rely on autonomous vehicles. Let's what I call below the ground, on the ground, and above the ground as smart transportation. Dubai and Singapore are going to be testing and launching autonomous taxi drones this year in September, October. We, from a policy standpoint, need to take that risk that was mentioned earlier here on stage, a calculated risk, but also make sure we're not falling behind, because, what's behind all of this, there is a bit of a global race. Technologies are now allowing countries, companies to take the leading edge. And when we've recognized the godfathers of AI a few months ago in the Turing Awards, which is like the Nobel Peace Prize Awards for tech or ICT, Montreal, Toronto, Canada is a global leader in AI, and everything smart today has AI as its foundation. So I think we need to look vertically, going down below the ground and above the surface, and then we need to look concentrically going out as well.
Thank you. Said with authority, and not only he has a charming English accent. Syed, Sue, any thoughts on what defines a smart transportation?
I completely agree. And I also agree with the previous speaker. I think smart mobility is where internet was back in the 1980s. And the transformation that is going to take place is a gradual one, and then you're going to see a very rapid one. And what's going to be important is what's going to happen inside the car, the features that you have. The car companies, if you talk to them, they are moving towards not just selling cars, but they're positioning themselves to providing mobility. And the future, the way it's being projected right now, is electrified, autonomous vehicles that are highly connected, and that is going to essentially turn your car into an entertainment center, into an office. Projections for the economic impact of that is about $500 billion in North America alone. Going to autonomous, electrified, you're also talking about another $500 billion in terms of safety implications of it, and about $300 million in terms of impact on fuel consumption, congestion, and so on. So economic, it sounds fantastical when you talk about $1.3 trillion in benefit annually. But when you look at the numbers behind it, somebody has actually put a value on people's lives, and a number of people that we are apparently worth about $8 million. If something happens to us, society loses $8 million. And they've actually gone and counted 32,000 deaths in the state, 2,000 in Canada per annum. And they've calculated this. And when you see these numbers, it's actually quite convincing. You believe in it. And so this is going to be a strong push towards this new future. And it's not just cars, it's also the infrastructure. The cars can only become autonomous if the infrastructure can communicate to them a very detailed three-dimensional map of what's there. So with that map, they can essentially identify ground, they can identify trees. So all of that overhead kind of goes out. So it's really not just cars. It's also intelligent transformation that you're seeing here, the movement that is taking. So a lot of exciting stuff.
Thank you. I don't think I'm worth more than a few $100,000, but I appreciate the financial flattery. Sue?
Oh, that's a great jumping off point. But before I segue from what you were just saying or riff off what you were just saying, I just, full disclosure, I'm not sure if the bios made it into the overviews. I did want to tell you that what I said was very, but my background is very checkered in terms of what industries and what areas I'm coming from. So I want to do full disclosure and say I started off being very interested in transportation and thinking, wow, you know, bicycles are an amazing way to get around the city. And then all hell broke loose. I realized that this is a whole system, that all of these things have to fit together. And then suddenly I ended up at the City of Toronto in the planning department and leading a lot of different sort of changes and policies early on in the 90s around bicycle transportation. Then I realized actually this has to all connect. And we developed something called Moving the Economy, which Luigi, I'm so sorry he left, but Luigi was very instrumental in that effort at the City of Toronto to look at how actually nobody saw this because urban transportation, even urban growth wasn't understood so much. That it's a huge market. It was in the days of Porter, who was saying these industry clusters are really important, and it was a time when we were dealing with some cutbacks at the province and at the city, and everybody was seeing public transportation as a cost, as a drain on the economy, not as a job creator, a source of urban and regional competitiveness, a cost saving through optimization by integrating all these different modes with the user in mind. And finally, the foundation for an emerging huge emerging mega industry. Now that was in 1998. We had a big conference followed by doing a study, which we ended up doing because I phoned around and said to my sort of global friends and said, hey, who's written the study on this emerging new mobility industry? Because it's giant. And nobody, apparently it didn't exist. So the industry that we see now is very related to that kind of questioning at the beginning of what I was doing. So basically, after the city, I ended up having a sheltered workshop at Harvard University at the design school, a very wonderful fellowship, which then meant that I was recruited to the University of Michigan to create and develop a program called SMART, which was meant to advance the new mobility industry because Ann Arbor, Michigan is in the belly of the automotive beast. So from that, I connected with Ford Motor Company, who pretty much supported our work all the way through the last 10 years. I've just left the university, but basically it was to say, what is the emerging market? And you've probably seen that Ford Motor Company is saying, we're no longer just a car company, we're a mobility company. So this is, in terms of the sustainability side of things, from my perspective, this is an infinite game, not a finite game. So there's a guy named James Carse who says that there are two kinds of games. One is finite, one's infinite. A finite game is meant to win, and an infinite game is meant to continue the play. And what I think is one of the most sustainable and exciting developments of transportation, and what you guys have been saying, it sounds similar. One of the most exciting things is that it's much less siloed than it used to be. It's not that the city planners don't talk to the industry, don't talk to the advocates, don't talk to the energy folks. all of the different elements are coming together through this mobility as a service. And I think that's one of the most exciting developments in this time when technology is outpacing policy. So it's much more important for us to be in constant communication and dialogue on how we co-innovate.
That was absolutely wonderful. So we've heard some really interesting terms such as multimodal mobility, integrated transportation, and I'm curious, how many folks here took an Uber or a Lyft to get here this morning? Hands up, Uber or Lyft? About a quarter, maybe a fifth. How many folks took public transportation? About half? Okay, fantastic. And how many folks drove their own vehicle? Electric, that was the next question. How many of those were electric or hybrid? Okay. And how many folks borrowed a car share? Anyone? Not as popular as it used to be. So just imagine 5 years ago how different your answers would have been, especially with the ride sharing side of things and with the electric side of things. I'm going to go off script a little bit. Want to have a bit of fun. So you often hear about a heaven and hell scenario for what transportation and mobility might look like, especially with the advent of autonomous vehicles. And Colin, I'll start with you. Can you paint us a little bit of what that heaven scenario might look like and what that hell scenario might look like?
Well, I just came back about a month ago from Singapore, and that was heaven. I haven't been to China yet, but I've heard, I actually just had lunch the other day with a friend who just got back from Shanghai, and his description of Shanghai and my description of Singapore seem to be one and the same. But, and I say, and I'll use Singapore as an example because the trade commissioners were very, very nice to create a full day schedule for me to meet all the different kind of government organizations that were involved with smart transportation and including infrastructure. So it was a day of learning and understanding how Singapore, yes, it is an island state. It's 5.7 million. It's one level of government. There really isn't other kind of competing parties. It's easy. I get that. But the fact that they develop a master plan, first of all, the fact that they pay their ministers nearly $2 million, which is similar to their dollar and our dollar on par, because they're saying, why let the best people go and run the best, largest corporations? Why not have them run our country? But they walked me through their proposal for introducing autonomous vehicles. And so subways stay. They say this is our best mode of transportation for the city, for the island. And then what they're going to do is they've already allocated 3 pockets of development throughout the island. And each one of those, when they develop their new, and everything's vertical, mind you. If you live in Singapore and you live in a house on the ground, you are minted. You are really well off. Everyone that I knew seemed to live in a condo, so they tend to go vertical. So using that kind of approach, they're basically going to say, look, the current ground level will be the autonomous level, and they're going to build a new level above. And that's where it's going to be pedestrianized, and that's where they'll have some regular vehicles. But moving vehicles for transportation of goods, moving people will be on the current ground level, which then kind of feels like a tunnel for the most part, or a lower level. And subways stay where they are, and it's a tropical area. Like it literally was heaven. Like the quality of everything they do is done so well. And then I've been researching Singapore, and I had no idea that it was the Singapore government and companies that were welcomed by Dubai to come and help them further develop when Dubai decided to say, hey, we're losing our oil kind of reserves. We're now going to get into construction in a big way, and we're going to go after global contracts. So guess who helped them? It was Singapore. So KPMG released a paper 2017 called The Islands of Autonomy, and I do firmly believe that that's a great model as well. The hell portion comes, I say, And I say it loudly because I can't stand silos. I couldn't stand them when I was in my auto job a few years ago. I don't like it in government. I don't like it anywhere. I think if we are horizontal and we remove those silos, things do work a lot better. I think if we're expecting autonomous vehicles in the next 5 years, and they will be ready, that level 4 technology will be ready within the next 3 to 4, to be honest. But if our infrastructure, now think about it, if you take pictures of Toronto from, say, 1907, especially, let's say, Yonge Street, and you look at Yonge Street today, our infrastructure, our urban planning is hundreds of years old. It was actually developed for the horse and carriage and the horse and cart. And so we actually, as urban planners, haven't even thought about, what's the real value out of developing a city or planning a city? Like, what freaks me out, my background's design, what freaks me out is how we still have these kind of 90 degrees intersections without chamfered corners, where we're expected to go and then look blindly down the street. We don't see down there. Why not chamfer a building, create rules where they have to have a 20-foot chamfer, and so when you're pulling up, you actually see where you're heading. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it sounds simple, it is simple, but the health scenario is when you've got autonomous vehicles or smart transportation, and it's not communicating to the pedestrians, to other vehicles, to the infrastructure. That for me is a hell scenario. I'm a big Elon Musk supporter. I love his passion and the risk-taking, the calculated risk-taking he does. But robo-taxis in Tesla's 2020 without smart infrastructure could be hellish.
Thank you. Sue, I'd love to unpack mobility as a service a little bit more, because I don't know if everyone's familiar with that idea. Can you paint us a picture?
Sure, it's actually pretty straightforward. And can I tie in the answer? Because it's sort of riffing off what you're saying. For me, the heaven scenario is pretty easy. It's basically that we can meet our needs, our transportation-related needs, by answering the question, how do we want to live? So if our transportation system, in all its glory, supports how we want to live, then that's heaven. And even if it has a whole bunch of newfangled fancy stuff or really beautiful old-fashioned stuff, but it's not connected with each other, like, a bus leaves you off a few blocks down a dark alleyway, nothing connects door to door. That to me is hell. And another hell is getting our ends and means mixed up. So thinking the goal is technology, or I guess the goal is infrastructure, and really the goal is the user. I hope that will still always be the case, that we're trying to make our own lives better with the support of our technologies, as opposed to trying to make the grooviest technology so that we can win the prize for the coolest technology. So anyway, the question was about mobility as a service. It's really quite straightforward. One of the things, the way I got into it was exactly sort of when I was already thinking about integrated systems and having conferences about it. But when I got to the University of Michigan, Ford Motor was saying, well, we want to look at what our markets are. And so then suddenly we were invited to India, South Africa, Brazil. Oh, can you help us, right? And so one of the things that occurred to me was, well, we need a map of all the stuff. And it doesn't need to be several maps. It needs to be one map with everything overlaid. And we did this in Washington, D.C. A colleague of mine was the director of planning there. And I said, put a red dot where two or more things already connect. Because we think that we have to start from scratch. We have to bulldoze everything down and then start the whole new system. But this is a little bit of a compromise between what you were saying and what I'm saying, in a sense that, in fact, has anyone tried to make kombucha? Okay, how about sourdough bread? Okay, so I think of a city like that. I think of a community like that we have this kind of, I shouldn't say it's not a mold, but it's some sort of a culture in our cities. And we're used to things. We also have our legacy industries that have contributed to that city, right? So we have all these things already. And what I love about how Moss is evolving, instead of saying four planners are going to get in a room and we're going to draw something out that we think is really cool, and we'll bring some designers in and some engineers, and then we'll tell everybody and we'll try and convince them why this is what they need. As opposed to, if you look at this map, suddenly you can see that you already have a system, but sometimes the transit company isn't talking to the train company, isn't talking to the highway people, isn't talking to the bike lane people. And so there's nothing really connecting. And then the people sure don't know about that. But as soon as you suddenly look, oh my God, it's not as bad as we thought, and we've got something to build on, and then you can build from there. And then you say, well, what do we have at our disposal? We have technologies, we have policies, we have physical infrastructure, we have new approaches to everything. And so in terms of Moss, what's happening with that is that I will say that Digifest is such a perfect place to talk about Moss, because the vision of Moss, the integrated multimodal, so that anyone, grandma, the person working, going to work in the morning, kids, should be able to easily and seamlessly move from one mode to the other in a customized way, different every time, with the use of their iPhone, and to be able to go from system to system interoperably. So that's what Moss is about. Really super simple. Just be able to get around and say, oh, what do I feel like doing today? The sun just came out. Oh, I'm going to grab that bike. Oh, okay, I'm going to drop the bike off, get right onto the train, that kind of thing. So that's what Moss is about. But right now, what has enabled it is the technology, and the technology enabled the business models. And those two things, the technology and the business models, were the things that wasn't unlocked. And we kind of crazy people, that people would look at us going like, that's impossible. Suddenly, it was a really funny transition for the, 20 of us that are thinking, wait, we need a whole integrated system, and it's all got to connect, and the technology is going to come someday. And it was just, but now it's on the ground. So in Europe, there's through the European Union and the ITS agencies and associations, and a lot of different associations, the Moss Alliance has happened to try and create sort of one Europe, so that there's much more interoperability across modes. And that's working from both a policy point of view and an industry point of view, and all for the purpose of being sustainable.
Thank you, Sue. And I'll add a little bit to that. There's a company in Europe called Mass Global, and what they offer essentially are multiple modes of transport using a single pane of glass. So anyone can download this app, and they have access to car share. They have access to public transportation, your local bike share, and even car rental. You can pay nothing and just pay your regular fees. You just type in, I want to get from A to B. It'll give you multiple routes. Or you can pay 50 euros a month and you get a discount on all of those. Or you can pay 499 euros a month, about the same that you'd pay for an expensive car lease, and you have free use of all of those services. So from a single pane of glass, you can get from A to B using at least 5 types of transportation, and all the payment goes through there as well, which is pretty brilliant. I'd love to use that here in Canada. Syed.
Just one quick thing.
Oh, sure.
If you're in South Africa or any kind of emerging economy, whereas my transport is also a similar, exactly the same thing. That's the form that Moss is taking, what you just so beautifully, briefly described. And sorry I took so long.
No, not at all. Not at all. I'm just hopeful that it gets here. I'm glad that it's already expanded to South Africa. I want to talk a little bit about, and we touched on the social and environmental benefits of smart transportation. So take it away.
Well, Canada has to be very proud, because if you look at the source of electricity for Canada, half of it is nuclear, a third in Ontario. A third of it is hydro. A lot of it is, I think, about 1/3 hydro, and then you have 15%, which is solar and wind, and then you have fossil fuels that take the ups and downs. So essentially what it means is that moving to this new form of transportation where it's electrified, ride sharing, you can really reduce emissions. Our normal cars, the ones that most people have, essentially the well-to-wheel efficiency is about 10 to 12%. So you put $10 in your car, $1 of it goes to take you from A to B, and the other 8 to 9 warms up your environment. You go to electric cars with the type of infrastructure that Ontario has currently, we're talking about efficiencies of about 67%. So $6 to $7 of it takes you from A to B. That's not true for China, where half of it is coal. Okay, you are better off driving hybrid cars rather than electric. So moving to ride sharing, moving to electrification, these have tremendous implications. 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions are due to transportation, so you're huge benefits. Economic, so that's just by this mode. But also, if you look at some of the data, you're talking about heaven. We're in purgatory right now, but highest rate of death for the age group of 15 to 27 is because of car accidents. I mean, if you have a young daughter like mine, who's just starting to drive, that's really of concern. And even though there have been accidents in terms of autonomous vehicles, that's because some of the car companies are taking chances with technology by introducing it earlier than it should be. This technology was available in 2006. And I remember visiting a lab in France, and I asked them, why aren't you commercializing it? They had 50 million euros to develop this in France as part of a European project. And I said, well, our detection rate for pedestrians is 97%. So 100 persons that cross the street, we miss 3 of them. Okay, that's basically the reality. You introduce an autonomous, our LiDAR system. We have one of them in my lab. We purchased it for $35, and that was the base. A good LiDAR was $75,000. Ford uses 4 of them in their cars. So $280,000 in sensors. We use infrared cameras, 10,000. By the time you instrument that car to be able to remove that probability, we're talking about $300,000 to $400,000. Autonomous cars that are on the road need to bring the cost to be reliable down to $3,000. Okay, once that happens, then you're seeing the safety benefits, the level 3, level 4 transportation that we are talking about, and the translation of that economic benefit of $1.3 trillion happening in the society that we're talking about. I can go on for a long time. I haven't talked about hell yet, but that's fine. I'd rather start with stuff with heaven.
That was perfect. You touched on both the social and the environmental. I'm just cognizant of time and making sure that we can catch up a little bit. We do have time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience. If anyone has a burning desire to know something that hasn't been touched on.
No, I'd love a clarification. You mean that right now autonomous is not smart enough and too expensive? Is that the bottom line?
When we purchased our LiDAR system, LiDAR creates a 3-dimensional map of your environment. And that was 5 years ago $70,000 per unit. Now, if you purchase the same unit, it's down to about $8,000 to $16,000. 3 years, 4 years from now, the projection is it's going to be between $200 to $400. And if you look at all of these car companies, they're not selling you level 3 or level 4 autonomy. They're selling you with the premise that your hands are there and you're able to take over the control of the vehicle. Okay? I kind of don't like that model, because if you're traveling at around, if you look at the Uber incident that took place with the Volvo car, it was late at night, and and if they had the systems that they had missed the pedestrian, a $10,000 infrared camera with a range of 200 meters could have prevented that accident. So all I'm saying is that I'm very grateful to Tesla and other companies that are pushing this forward. But this introduction of this technology has to be done in a very responsible way. Ford Motor Company had this technology 10 years ago. A lot of Toyota, BMW is perhaps one of the most advanced areas. You don't see them introducing these into the roads because of the probability of detection. So it's not that, we're not there. If your question is, are we at level 3, level 4, we're not there. Is it adequate to expect you to take over the driving and given about 3 seconds to react, 3 to 7 seconds to react to a condition such as I don't think so. Could it be prevented? Yes, it can be. You have to spend $300,000 on the car, 5 times to what you pay in order to get that level of safety. And right now, 10 years from now, price of sensors will come down to about $3,000, and that's when you're seeing really a big rollout of this technology happening. Looking at the sensors, costs are coming down, progress is being made, and it's how fast you roll it out.
I'd just like to make a few comments on that. Let's not forget that General Motors will launch this year a level 5 vehicle. Level 5 meaning there's no steering wheel, there's no foot pedals. It's the Cruise. It's not going to be available for you and I. They are developing this vehicle in small volumes to be used as taxi fleets. So, a level 5 doesn't have a set of steering wheels, set of pedals and a steering wheel. So they've jumped the gun, because I somewhat agree with what the doctor said. But the challenge is, a lot of this testing is going on in, Arizona and California, because they don't have, 4, seasons. They have 1. They don't have falling leaves, which, today's LiDAR may not detect as falling leaves. It may be, is that an animal, or is that kind of a part of a human that kind of rushed across the road and, the LiDAR only, these are all the questions the intelligence of the vehicle are having to answer. They don't get snow over there. There's this digital twin that everyone's talking about, and 3D mapping of cities. So the vehicle has more intelligence. And we're working with the folks out on the West Coast. We are imploring them to come to Canada. We're saying, you want to test your vehicle and you want to put out all of these statements, come and test them in the city of Stratford in November through to March. And then we'll truly know where we are. Because, I think, that will be a key factor, is how it behaves. I drive a Tesla, and I use my autopilot, which is the worst name for it, mind you. It should just be called ADAS 1.0, because autopilot makes you think that, hey, it's hands off the steering wheel. The latest software update actually requires you, after every 20 seconds, it checks, it's like, have you got your hands on the steering wheel? And if you don't, it literally kicks you out of it within a minute. But I use it in traffic on the highway, and it's daunting initially because my sensors, my eyes especially, are seeing the brake lights, and it expects the car, but my car tends to react to like a few milliseconds after because it's judging mathematically the distance. And so when I see the brake lights, that's normally when my foot goes on the pedal, but my car's saying, ease it, I'm seeing the distance, and I will then therefore slow down accordingly. So there is a move, there is the intelligence. I would say that with LiDAR, with radar, and with optical cameras, we are at level 3 and level 4 today, potentially, but not ready for the road necessarily. It should still be done in a testing format. It should be done, in a controlled environment, because speed is still the key thing. If you read about the companies, Uber, Waymo, Tesla, when they talk about their kind of, autonomous vehicles, and they'll throw in like, we are testing now at 85 kilometers an hour. We are testing at 55 kilometers, because speed has a lot to do with it as well. So as they start to show the numbers of the speed increase, it will also probably show the technology increase. And just finishing off, I actually don't think we will be purchasing autonomous vehicles for ourselves, because I think if a Tesla's putting you back 6 figures and you throw on the autonomous technology, let's say another 25 to 35, 40,000, the average Joes, we aren't going to be purchasing them. These are going to be purchased by fleets initially until, as Dr. Syed said, until the costs and the numbers come down where it may be attractive, because, people don't realize, but, the magic number in the States for a monthly payment on a vehicle is $430. But guess what's happened? People still want to pay $430 a month, but now the plans have gone from 3 to 5 years up to 10 years. So people are going into a dealership and getting a 10-year lease or a finance plan because they don't want to pay beyond that. Now, what's increased the cost over the last decade? It's technology. And so think about the autonomous technology they're going to add in. Like, it will not be something that will be driving around, but you will be seeing them on the roads, I reckon, within 5 years.
With that, final wrap-up question, single number, when do you predict that Toronto will have hailing autonomous taxis available for public use?
I'm going to purposely divert the question and say that it does relate, because everybody says, I remember like years ago on a really important call, someone said the most important question for all us, people that are doing stuff in sustainable transportation, the most important question is, when are autonomous vehicles going to be on the road? And to me, that was not the most important question. The most important question is, when are people going to have a system that serves them amazingly, serves individuals, serves the local economy, serves the environment? So I wanted to sort of frame it to say that we need to get to MOS level 2, because MOS level 1 is a few people are making it happen. Mobility as a service, all these integrated things. But in terms of digital future, for anyone who's in the digital realm in this room, the juiciest place to be is at the intersection of all of the different modes, services, products, technologies. Because if we think about autonomous vehicles, that's only one thing. And automation itself can go across the whole system and should be applied to integrate all the different modes together. So I just wanted to ask you one more question. Is there anyone planning to see Avengers? I've never seen any of the other ones yet, but I've heard so much about the Avengers. And I think what's really exciting is that all of the different superheroes are coming together, and that's what's happening in transportation. And the digital opportunity in energy, tourism, transportation, planning, infrastructure, physical space, blockchain, financing, new policies, unbelievable opportunities across the whole system, not just inside the vehicle where the dashboard is.
Great. Let's wrap it up right there. So thank you for your expertise, and join me in thanking the panelists.